What's up guys, Asian here again with another PTS video, and today we're taking a look at the set known as Deadly Strike. So this is actually an old set that is currently on the live server right now, but on the PTS they did update the way that Deadly Strike works. So I believe on live right now it is one of those 3-piece sets, those rare 3-piece sets that I believe just adds I think it's weapon damage and weapon crit. I could be wrong on that, but generally speaking, Deadly Strike on the live server right now is a pretty useless set. It's a 3-piece set. Agility beats it out as another competing 3-piece set, so Zos decided to update it accordingly in order to bring it more make it a little bit more relevant to the current gameplay. So before we start things off here, I first do want to apologize for the kind of brightness over by the windowsill over here. It has snowed last night, so we are getting some whitewash from the snow that is out on the lawn, and the curtains here obviously are not doing a very good job at kind of filtering out that reflected light. So apologies if the webcam image looks a little bit washed out. Of course, that does not affect the actual screen capture. The second thing I do want to note of is that there have been a lot of posts about the racial changes that have been happening and how they kind of are going about DPS rankings in terms of both magicka and stamina. There have been a few posts on the forums, there have been a few posts on Reddit, and of course I released a video yesterday taking a look at racial differences. Now, generally speaking, and this is kind of a consensus that we've come to in toxic rating environment among all like the endgame rating community, is that most of the races, if not all the races, are within such a close margin to each other that crit RNG is going to make a larger factor than the actual racial differences. So I will be kind of re-exploring this as the PTS cycle continues in case there are any sort of changes, but I will release a separate video kind of going over why you shouldn't be all worked up about the racial changes, mathematics behind it, as well as a couple of sample parses to kind of better explain what I'm talking about here. But anyways, this video is about Deadly Strike, so let's move on ahead here. So they did change Deadly Strike from the on live server right now. So again, on the live server it's a 3-piece set, but right now on the PTS they did change it, so now it is a 5-piece set and it drops in medium armor. So you can get the jewelry, you can get the armor pieces, you can get weapons, and it'll all be jewelry be in robust, and the armor will be medium armor. So it adds weapon damage, weapon crit, and weapon damage on the 2, 3, 4-piece, and then the 5-piece increases the damage your physical, bleed, poison, and disease damage over time abilities do by 14%. Now, the immediate thought that I had when I saw this was, well, let's test it out on a Templar, because Templars biting jabs, which is their main spamble, does count as a damage over time ability. So this might be a decent buff for Templars. Even though Power of the Light is not considered a damage over time ability, pretty much all of your stamina DPS abilities, at least your classic ones, so I'm going to DK right now. So Endless Hail, Poison Injection, Razor Caltrops, Rending Slashes, those would all be buffed by Deadly Strike. And then from there, it's what other class abilities are you using, any spambles that you're using that might also be considered damage over time abilities. So Stamina DKs, Stamina Templars, and Stamina Sorcs are probably the 3 classes that have a spammable that is considered a damage over time. Wardens and Nightblades do not. Their spambles are considered direct damage, so they will not see as big of a benefit from using Deadly Strike. So as a result, I decided to do a couple of tests here, looking at Stamina Templars, Stamina DKs, and Stamina Sorcs, to kind of see how Deadly Strike on the front bar stacks up compared to Advancing Yokeda on the front bar. So the builds were pretty much identical. The only things I changed out here were the front bar set, so I had Deadly Strike or I used Advancing Yokeda. And then I also did do VMA tests, so there was a post last night on the stream from somebody who made a VMA stand DK build. That video, I'm still doing a few parses just to kind of make sure things are squared away, and then I will be releasing a video on that probably tomorrow morning or tomorrow early afternoon, so be on the lookout for that. But for right now, we're just going to be comparing Deadly Strike front bar to Advanced Yokeda front bar. Body set was always Relequen, and the monster helm set was always Velidreth, and we were always in 7 medium armor pieces, always had 3 Bloodthirsty, always had 3 weapon damage enchants, always were a Khajiit, always had dagger swords, because that's what RNG decided to give me when I decided to go out and buy the Deadly Strike random boxes. VMA bow on the back bar with a weapon damage enchant, infused, double infused, absorb stam, and poison damage enchants. Again, these are not necessarily going to be the best enchants if you're looking to maximize DPS. Those tests will be coming later on in the week. So other than that, obviously the skills pretty much vary depending on the specific class I was using, but generally speaking, I pretty much followed the meta builds that I already have posted for Murkmire. So now let's go ahead and take a look at the results. I'm gonna hop and swap screens here. So these are the results for Deadly Strike versus Advancing Yokeda. Now, one thing I will mention here before we kind of go over the actual averages is that Advancing Yokeda is going to scale a little bit better with Warhorn. So these are solo parses, so we're not getting Major Force, we're not getting Warhorn, the resource boost, we're not getting Minor Berserk or Major Fracture or anything like that. It's just all self-buffs. So we're kind of limited in that regard, but because we're looking at comparisons within a class rather than between classes, self-buff parses are going to be relatively okay. The only thing, again, I do want to mention is that with Major Force uptime, Advancing Yokeda does scale better. In other words, if you have good Major Force uptime from Warhorn, good Warhorn rotation, you'll see a larger increase in your DPS if you're using Advancing Yokeda compared to Deadly Strike, just because the crit modifier increases by a larger percentage. So this right here is Stam Sorks, obviously going to be the lowest because we don't have any sort of additional fracture or anything like that, any sort of class buffs. So with Advancing Yokeda, we're sitting at 42.5, and Deadly Strike is also 42.5. The difference here in the averages is about 8 DPS, resulting in pretty much a wash, 0.02% difference. The absolute highest parse for Deadly Strikes was 42,799 compared to 42,688 for Advancing Yokeda, but Advancing Yokeda did have slightly higher low parses, so the lowest was 42,234 versus 42,034 for Deadly Strike. So for Stam Sorks, looks like you can go with either or. So Deadly Strikes, because it is a serial set, you can actually buy it off of guild traders. So Deadly Strike is going to be a very nice set to tide you over until you can get Advancing Yokeda. Next up on our list, this is the Stamina Templar. So we do have Minor Fracture, but we don't have Major Fracture in our tool set here. So our averages, Advancing Yokeda pulled 44.2k and Deadly Strike pulled 45k with a difference of 1.79%. Now I do know somebody who did do tests on a Templar with a couple of raid buffs. I believe it was with Comet Prayer and Major Fracture, and they found that once you introduce Comet Prayer and Major Fracture, this percentage difference narrows down to pretty much insignificant, so below 1%. So take that as you will. In terms of max versus mins here, so Advancing Yokeda, the min was 44,029, the max was 44,434. For Deadly Strike, the min was 44,550, and the max was 45,370. So Deadly Strike does seem to be a little bit better on Templar. Again, Nas did do a test with Comet Prayer and Major Fracture and found that the percentage difference did drop down to basically insignificant figures. But again, because Deadly Strikes is a purchasable set, it might be easier just to buy Deadly Strike versus farming for Advancing Yokeda instead on a Templar. So I would consider Deadly Strike to be a good set to look for if you are a Templar main. And finally, we do have the Stam Decay here. Advancing Yokeda averaged out 46.1k, Deadly Strike averaged out 46.5k, resulting in a 0.94% difference, just barely on a threshold of insignificance, at least by my subjective standards. The max for Advancing Yokeda was 46,576. The max for Deadly Strike was 46,793. The min for Advancing Yokeda was 46,024, and the min for Deadly Strike was 46,054. Oh, I lied. The max for Deadly Strike is actually this 47,211 parse. So it does seem like Deadly Strike is going to be a little bit better for Stam Decay. I have not seen anybody who has tested this with the raid parses, raid buffs, I should say. So we are getting Major Fracture here, but we're not getting things like Minor Berserk or Minor Vulnerability or anything like that as a Stam Decay. So it does seem like, again, the pattern here is that Deadly Strike does seem to be a good alternative to Advancing Yokeda, and it's much easier to obtain set just because you can buy it off of guild traders. That being said, though, it will cost you gold, so Deadly Strike, it will cost gold, or you can farm it using AP, or you can just go straight into like normal Hell Ra and just try to farm out advanced Yokeda weapons and then go to Vet to get the jewelry. But for those of you guys who don't want to do Vet Hell Ra for the gold jewelry, Deadly Strike is a perfectly viable alternative, at the very least for DKs, Templars, and Sorcs. For Nightblades and Wardens, you probably will not see as big of a benefit from Deadly Strike because your spammable is not considered a damage over time ability. Now, going back over to ESO, there are a couple of nuances here that I do want to mention when using Deadly Strikes that might be a little bit counterintuitive here. So Deadly Strike will, I believe, buff Standard of Might, because Standard of Might is considered a damage over time ability. So we have 2702, and if I go ahead and take out, oh, I'm not on the right bar here. So 2702 versus back here. 2702, so it does seem like Standard of Might actually is not affected. Oh, that's because it's flame damage, duh. So sorry about that. But for those of you guys who are wondering whether or not Ballista will count will be buffed with Deadly Strike, the answer is no. So Ballista actually is considered a direct damage ability. So right now we have 51883 physical damage on our back bar here. So if we go to our front bar, 61074. This might just be because we have that weapon damage. So if I take this out, you'll see we're still, oh, because of the swords. I should probably take out the daggers then, or rather I can just swap sets here. Actually no, that won't do. But Ballista is considered a direct damage ability, and it's not considered a damage over time ability. So actually, there's an easier way to do this. So 61074. Go over to CPs and take out from Master at Arms. You'll see that it drops down to 54730. So Ballista is considered direct damage, not considered damage over time. So Deadly Strike will not actually impact Ballista at all. But anything that's basically buffed by Thaumaturge will be buffed by Deadly Strikes. So that would include things like I mentioned, Templar Biting Jabs. It'll include Venomous Claws. I believe both ticks of Venomous Claws. So there's the initial tick and then a damage over time tick. Those are both impacted by Deadly Strike. Noxious Breath is considered damage over time. Rending Slash with the Bleed. Endless Hail, Poison Injection, Razor Caltrops. All of these are buffed by Deadly Strike. Rearming Trap is as well. Flames of Oblivion is not, because that's considered direct damage. In terms of other classes, Hurricane for Stamsorcs is impacted because that is considered damage over time. And then, like I mentioned, for Templars, Biting Jabs is effective. Power of Delight is not. So the odd one out here is Ballista, and that's just because Ballista is considered direct damage and is not buffed by Thaumaturge. So general rule seems to be that if it's buffed by Thaumaturge, it is buffed by Deadly Strike. So that is pretty much it for this video. So the overall conclusion, I would say, is that Deadly Strike is a good alternative to Advanced Yokeda, but it probably will not beat Advanced Yokeda in groups that have good major force uptime. So hopefully you guys found this video informative. If you guys have any other tests that you want me to see, want me to do on the PTS, feel free to leave them down in the comment section below. If you guys have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them down in the comment section below as well. Hopefully you guys found this video fun and informative, and I'll see you guys in the next dungeon.